Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and welcome to episode 49 of the podcast. So today I'm chatting with Elizabeth Townsend Gard, and she has a podcast called Just Wanna Quilt. So she's a law professor out of Tulane University, and she studies and teaches copyright law. So Just Wanna Quilt is all about quilting and understanding the quilting industry, but kind of at that slight bent towards copyright law and understanding branding and licensing and patenting and that whole thing, because quilting is really interesting. We start out as, making some quilts, buy a pattern and put something together. But a lot of our patterns are in the public domain. A lot of our quilt blocks are in the public domain because they were published over 100 years ago. So there's that element where we've got this huge resource of open source, wonderful things to play with and make. And then maybe you get into it and you start playing around and then you're like, oh, I have this idea for this tool or this ruler or this whatever, and then you decide to make that thing, and that's where patenting can come in lots of different things like that. Then you might get into making a certain style of quilts, and that becomes your brand. So there's a lot of different layers here, and I found this really fascinating talking to Elizabeth. I was on her podcast, and so then we kind of switched. So she came on my podcast too. It's really nice to be able to do that. And it's interesting because, we each have a different way of sharing the podcast, but it really worked out. And we actually filmed we recorded both episodes in one day. And that was a workout, but it really worked out well. So I hope that you'll check out my episode for Elizabeth on Just Wanna Quilt. And you'll also enjoy getting to know Elizabeth here on Hello, My Quilting Friends. So now what am I working on today? I am working on a new Dresden plate quilt block. So this is a 20 petal Dresden plate, and I'm turning the center circles so that way that can be stitched on the center. Yes, I'm still working on my goddess embroidery in the house, but this is something that has suddenly popped up as a priority project that I need to get done and quilted in about 2 weeks. So this has just suddenly jumped to the top of the pile. And why has it jumped to the top of the pile? Well, this is actually the secondary project to a new set of rulers. And these are being cut by Grace Company. So we have 3. And these are going to be available hopefully within the next month or so. And I love working with Grace Company because, I was like, can I share these? Can I tell people about it? I'm so excited about it. And they were like, of course, logical. Of course you can share them. Of course you can tell people about them. So they're going to be quilting rulers available both on long arm machines and on home sewing machines. And they are designed the way I like to design rulers, and that is for multiple purposes. So it's not just stick it on your machine and quilt with it. You can also do some cutting with these too, and that's really exciting. So slice ruler, it's a 18-degree wedge, so you can cut Dresden plates, you can cut tumbler quilts, all kinds of things, and that's what I'm experimenting with today, just to make sure it works, and all the different things that you can do with it. And then I've got mini slide and super slide, and these are wave rulers, nicely spaced out with some lines, so you can do all kinds of quilting with some curves, but you could also do a lot of different things with cutting. And I've been playing with free cutting applique shapes and playing around with some binding techniques, all kinds of cool stuff. And if you'd like to see photos of these, you can check out the show notes, and that's going to be at leahday.com/episode 49. So yeah, that's going to be up in the next month or so. That's really, really exciting. And kind of the push for this, why this kind of popped up real quick, is there's a big show, a trade association show that's for machine manufacturers, and it happens to be coming to Charlotte, which is only an hour away from me. So it was just kind of a lucky combination of events that Grace is going to be there, and I'm going to go and demo for them and share these rulers. So that is really, really exciting, and I cannot wait to see what comes out of this. And it's also great to be manufacturing this and have that kind of partner with Grace Company. I did come out with my own set of rulers last year as the Dresden plate template set. It's a really big set. This is 10 rulers, and we have a few of them left, but we're probably not going to produce it again simply because it was just so many templates to cut, and it got really, really expensive. So, you know, I got the experience that I needed making that set, and that was really, really good. But now working with Grace, you know, I've learned, you know, cut them and make them singles, you know, make them one at a time, not, you know, a 10-piece set, which can get, you know, really, really expensive. So I learned a lot making them myself, and then have taken that knowledge to design these for Grace. And then I have even more ideas coming too that I'm just, you know, once I started thinking about all the different possibilities and things, you know, not just making something for machine quilting, but also thinking about, well, how can I design something that also has some function for cutting as well? Even if it's just cutting out some simple applique shapes, that's still expanding what the ruler can do. It's not just a unitasker, you know? So that's really excited. I cannot wait to see the next set. And this is a complicated process because it's, you know, one thing to draw the design, but it's another thing to get it produced just right for the laser cutter to cut and all that good stuff. And there's some back and forth. And I shot a picture of all the different rulers that we've cut. Dad's actually cut some out for me. He cut me this one on the bandsaw in our wood shop because, you know, sometimes I'm just double checking that the wedge is correct and just wanted to see it. So Dad cut that one out for me and then used a scribe to etch it, you know. So, you know, there's a complicated process here of just making sure it's cut right and then testing each one to make sure it's just, you know, the right size, the right shape, the right repeat, all that good stuff. And so I now have, I'm probably going to end up with quite a few prototypes in progress, and that's okay. You know, that's part of the process. I learned that with my own Dresden plate template set, that the first time you cut it is not going to be, it's not going to be right. You're going to have to keep trying and keep going, and that's all about the design process. So there we go. I've got another circle made here, and I'm just turning these circles. This is a technique that I taught last year for our Flower Festival quilt, and you can still find a tutorial on this in that series. And this is just turning a circle shape with freezer paper. That's all I'm doing here. And now I'm going to turn it right back out again and give it a good press. There we go. This is just a nice, patient little project to work on. I enjoy turning the edges of applique shapes. I hardly ever have time to really do a big applique quilt, but it's just kind of nice to sit around and play with starch and, and freezer paper. So one big thing that I've decided to change, just starting this week, has been the way that I share tutorials. So up until this point, I've kind of bounced around. Sometimes I'll share a tutorial and it'll go on leahday.com. That's my website. And then sometimes I'll share the tutorial and it'll go up on my blog, freemotionproject.com. And most often it goes on the blog just simply because it's a little easier to post there, a little faster. But, you know, just a combination of different things. I made a decision this week that I wanted to change that. And I want to be more consistent and to really have a clear separation of the two spaces, and to turn my blog back into a blog, a web log, or a journal. So yeah, all of my tutorials, including the show notes for the podcasts, are going to go back to leahday.com. That's where everything is going to be posted from here on out. So that feels really great, just to make sure that I have, you know, kind of a clear division between the two. Like, you know, the blog is for blogging and journals and, you know, a daily log of what's going on. And then the website is going to be for tutorials and where you come to learn. And that really works well in my head. Even though it is taking just a little bit longer to get posts up, it's a little bit more complicated putting it on leahday.com, that's okay. I think it's worth the time and extra effort. And speaking of tutorials, I got a new one for you this week. We have this sock darning tutorial. I shared a picture of one of the socks that I darned and asked if people wanted a tutorial for it, and everybody said yes. So I shot a video and shared it on Monday so you can learn how to darn your socks. And just in case you didn't know it, sock darning was a precursor to free motion quilting. So the whole reason why we have darning feet on our machine, which is what we use for free motion quilting, the whole reason we have those is because back in the day we used to darn our clothing a lot more, and that was a pretty important thing to be able to do. You know, these days very few people want to, you know, fix their clothing, but I had a whole lot of socks that just have the heel busted out, and it annoys me to throw away a perfectly good sock when I could repair that heel, you know, really quickly and easily. So that's one of those things that, you know, I'm trying to share more of the things that I really want to do, you know, the projects that are really exciting me and really getting my creative juices flowing. And that's, you know, where this Dresden plate quilt is coming from. And I probably will share this as a step-by-step tutorial or a free quilt pattern, along with, you know, the videos on how to use the rulers as well. So I'm planning on probably shooting like the step-by-step piecing and then, of course, the quilting as I go with this project. So that'll be a lot of fun. And I'm trying... I am really trying to get ahead on things because it's tough when I feel like, you know, I'm shooting something, editing it, and then it's going up like the next day. That is really, really tough. And it makes it hard to feel like, it just feels like everything's kind of on the edge. So I'm trying to work ahead. I'm trying to be a lot more consistent with that. And I know once I get ahead on everything, that'll feel so much better. Now, a little update on Mally the Maker. I had set a personal deadline to try and get the book done by March 15th, and it just didn't happen. I had a big rewrite that I had to do. Just some stuff wasn't working in the book, and writing this whole novel has been so interesting, and I started thinking about, like, how can I describe this to quilters to understand how much the book has changed from what I expected. And I guess the best way to describe it is I started out like planning to make a log cabin quilt, and I've ended up with a giant dahlia. I've made both of these before, and they are wildly different. So that'll let you know just how different this book is from what I first expected. I mean, not in a bad way. This is exactly where it needed to go. But I'm loving it, and it feels like we're back on track again. I've said that before, but it feels like we're back on track again and moving forward. I'm hoping to be able to get to the end. You know, now it's all established. The little girl's got what she needed to get, and you know, can kind of get to the climax, her last epic battle with the bad guy, and finish off the book. You know, it's just still in progress. It's kind of a continual process of figuring out what comes next, and it's a delight. I have thoroughly enjoyed writing this, and I'm already starting to think about, okay, well, what comes next for Mally? What's the next step? Because of course this is going to be a series. It has to be a series. You know, it's just, I love everything about it, and I've had so much fun, so why wouldn't it be a series? So that's pretty much it for the updates around the house. That's what's going on. I have one last big announcement, and that is the Squares and Sashings workshop. So this is a workshop where you will learn how to quilt 33 quilting designs, and you'll learn how to quilt them in squares and sashing spaces. And the sashing is narrow 2-inch spaces that can sometimes be really tricky to quilt. A lot of quilters leave that area of their quilts blank. So you'll get 17 different designs and ideas for quilting in the sashing. And I also include how to piece the quilt, some really excellent free motion quilting basics just to get you started. And I hope that I can sell you on quilting densely, which gives you a really good bang for your buck. You can get so much more practice and repetition quilting dense than you can if you quilt big. You will end up with a wall hanging. It's a beautiful wall hanging, and it will really help you learn more about free motion quilting. So I hope that you'll come and join me for this workshop. It's super squares and sashing, and you can find it at leahday.com/squares. So come and check it out and join me for this quilting class. And now let's meet Elizabeth Townsend Gard and talk about quilting and copyright. Hello, my quilting friends. Leah Day here with Elizabeth Townsend Gard. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me. I'm super psyched.
Excellent. Now, a little introduction. Elizabeth is a law professor at Tulane University Law School who is best known for her work on copyright and a copyright tool called the Duration. Sorry, I knew I would butcher that. Durationator. Her newest project focuses on quilting research podcast, and it's called Just Wanna Quilt. So let's get started talking about that. What is Just Wanna Quilt?
Well, it's a little bit of a dream. So I'm a law professor, and I finished all the things I need to do as a law professor officially. So I'm a full professor, and the dean asked me what my next project, what I wanted it to be, and I said I wanted it to be about quilting. So it's really looking into the culture of quilting and sort of what quilting is, and then I'm going to do some academic writing about what I find, and then sort of a general book about sort of quilting and copyright and other things, trademark and all that. So it just allowed me to sort of blend my love of quilting with my day job. And so now when I quilt at night, I think, well, I'm quilting because I'm a law professor and I have to quilt. So it's really cool. And then I get to talk to people like you and others, and it's fun.
Excellent. So tell me about your quilting journey. How did you first learn about quilts? Did you grow up with them?
I made my first quilt when I was 13. My mom took me to the quilt shop, and I picked out a bunch of fabric. And I think I came home and I made the quilt. I made her help me sew it, and we did it like in 48 hours. I don't think we even slept. I was like, I like this lots. Then the next time I kind of dabbled a little bit, but the next time I got really serious was in grad school, because we had an apartment building and it was next to a quilt shop. So I was in law school, and I would just kind of wander over, and then I started quilting again. And then there's some sad times, and so quilting, when I was in grad school, we were trying to have a kid, and we kept having problems, and so the quilting community was super nice to kind of just go there and quilt and not be sad and quilt. Then my daughter was 5, and we decided to start quilting again pretty seriously. We just started paper piecing, because she could paper piece animals, and it was very, awesome to have an owl or a pig or whatever, and it would turn out. And then we did a shop hop a few years ago, and then I just sort of got really into it from there. So I think I've been kind of more like aggressive hobbyist for a couple years now.
Wow, that's excellent. It sounds like quilting has definitely been with you and kind of a pattern that's coming back to you continually throughout your life. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, and I think, we've been doing these interviews. I think that's true of a lot of people, where it changes. Like your relationship, somebody said my relationship with quilting always changes, but it's always part of my life, which I really liked. I thought that was really insightful,
Yeah, absolutely. I know my relationship with quilting was very different when I first started versus now as a business. There are times we don't get along as well as we once did. It's less of that relaxation, and it's more of kind of looking at it, in a much more, I guess, analytical way. Do you find that now that you're doing the podcast?
Yeah, it's funny. I wanted to ask you that when I was chatting with you, is that I thought, does it change your relationship when it becomes a business? And I was worried a little bit about that. If I'm doing this, am I going to feel... And there was a moment this year, because I'm trying to sort of figure out what to do for the year, and I'm trying to experiment. I'm trying to quilt every night and sort of figure out what that was. And last year it was just kind of random. This year I'm trying to kind of do a few block of the month, quilt as you go, to sort of experience like 4 or 5 of them at a time this year. I haven't quite figured out which ones, but there was a moment yesterday where I thought, this is very stressful. I have a lot of quilts to make. And I thought, that's stupid. That's really dumb. No, it's not about like the pressure. It's like you get to quilt at night, like when everyone else is off doing their other things. So you got to keep reminding yourself, like, this is the fun part. Like, this is not supposed to be stressful. So.
Yeah. That's actually funny. I have a lot of participants in the quilt along, and we've got multiple quilts going on, and yes, some of them have been like, oh my gosh, this is so stressful, getting everything kind of cut and prepped and stuff. And I always comment back like, it is just a quilt. it's okay. It's just fabric. It'll be there for you tomorrow, and two, like when we make mistakes, it's kind of like, it is just needles and thread and fabric. You can go get some
Right.
more. It's not the end of the world. So, yeah, it's definitely one of those things I think can change. And when you get too many projects going at once, that's when I can start feeling really overwhelmed too. How do you feel about multiple projects, multiple quilts going at any given time?
I like it because I have like kind of. I think I don't have a very. I have a. I don't. I like the variety. So, but I have like piles. So I have always something I'm piecing. Something I love free motion quilting. I'm using your videos to get better at it. And so I always have a project to do free motion quilting. I always have a piecing project, and I really don't like that complicated ones. And then my pile, then they've all and the binding is fine. Is that very last bit of binding with the hand sewing? So my pile is just getting out of control. So I think this year, like I've got maybe 10, 12 quilts that need to be just finished. Like little bits need to be finished, like just a little bit. So I think I'm going to take those bits and do them during my faculty meetings. So that's my new strategy. Any hand quilting, I'm just going to take it to school, and then those weekly faculty meetings, I'm just going to be binding quilts, finishing them because the tile is getting out of control. So.
Yeah, I set aside like 30 minutes of handwork time every night. And I have found that I can get amazing amounts of stuff done over like a long period of time. Just that 30 minutes to an hour. I watch a show with my son on the couch. And so he's watching the show and enjoying it. I'm listening to it while I hand stitch. And that little bit, I mean, it really does make a big difference when you start building that habit. Like, okay, faculty meeting, I must have a quilt in my hands. That will probably be a system that works. That's great.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm in a law school. So the thing that's cool about the project is I explained to them. So the university is paying for, they paid for machines, and I went to Quilt Market this year, and so it's part of my job. I mean, it really is. It's funded by the university, and but it is funny because I'm in a law school, so the majority of the faculty are men, and I feel like it's kind of a feminist act of like I am who I am, and I'm quilting in this meeting. So there's a kind of that they always come over and want to learn about it and see the colors, and like it's very funny. So there's that aspect too of being a law professor who quilts and not being afraid to demonstrate that in public. So.
Yeah. Back in high school, I would knit through class,
That's
and
awesome.
in a college too, and it kept me awake. Like some classes are just so boring, and it's like, well, if you tell me to put this away, I'll put this away, but you'll probably see me sleeping in class.
Did anyone get mad at you for quilting? For knitting, did anyone tell you not to do it?
I had one or two like that would just kind of glare at me, but then
Yeah.
they would realize that I was actually paying more attention and
Yeah.
more focused on what they were saying, and then I would start like like they would call out a question and I would answer, even though I had knitting needles and yarn in my hands. I was clearly still attentive, so they would usually drop it. I did knit in a job once. I was like a retail sales clerk, and I had they were like, I think that you can put the knitting away now and help customers. So.
It's funny. I find that when I'm in meetings, it keeps me calmer because like I find the pace of meetings to be kind of slow and annoying. So I feel like it's a very Zen thing of is keeping you, for me, keeping me in a good zone where there's ridiculousness all around. So
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, and it kind of, I am the same way. I start getting agitated. Why am I having to sit here and like listen to you guys just talk or something like that? Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So let's talk about copyright. This is a big focus with your podcast. What got you interested in that in particular, and certainly in relation to quilting?
Well, obviously, so intellectual property has like 5 buckets: patents, trademarks, copyright, right of publicity, and trade secrets. And because quilting naturally fits in copyright, protecting literary works, artistic works, all of that. So that's the natural place you think about quilting. And so the project looks at sort of how much does copyright influence people's behavior and business and other things, because there's some studies out there that says that copyright isn't as important as people think it is to protecting or building businesses. And so we're looking at that. And we've had other projects. We did a video games and the law book that was published by Rutledge. We're doing another one on cosplay. We're doing one on photographs because photographs are kind of weird and they have some issues. But my biggest project right now is this quilting project. We also found that it isn't just copyright. So when you and I were talking, brand is really important to quilters and quilting businesses, and that seems to be as important, if not more important, than copyright. We also found so far that patents are really interesting and an interesting element to the quilting industry because you think about tools and machines, processes, and so we're talking to people about that as well. So it's turned into a bigger project, which they always do. What project doesn't turn into a big gargantuan project? But it's been really fun. We've done 60 interviews. I've done 60 interviews since Thanksgiving.
Wow, that is a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That is a lot of conversation. So do you have a consensus yet as far as how quilters feel about copyright and how that is affecting how they make quilts and how they share quilts, whether it's a hobbyist or a professional?
No. So I think, I'm pretty cautious on the copyright side because I always worry that people are going to hear something and then say, oh, see that, Elizabeth said this, and that makes me really nervous. So on the copyright side, we're still trying to really understand, and sort of my philosophy in any sort of serious research is that it's going to take us time to really understand the industry and understand what's happening. So I think, it's kind of funny because you just did an interview and we don't really talk about copyright that much, but by you talking, I can get a better sense of sort of what role intellectual property plays in your life because of sort of how you're talking and what you're doing. So I think we're going to have to do more interviews and then we'll start doing the really hardcore copyright work in the summer. So I'm pretty careful about it. I think it's really important to get it right. And so we're not ready yet to really, I can tell you really goofy things, but, the pattern people are worried about people stealing their patterns and the guilds don't know what they can and can't copyright. And people are afraid that there's copyright police. They think I'm the copyright police, which I'm not. So I don't know yet. We'll know soon, though. We'll know by the summer, I suspect. We're going to try to we're trying to get to 200 interviews. We're at 60. But I think that we need to really understand. And we're doing interviews of everybody. So if you have listeners out there, we need you. I need average quilters of all skills and levels to come chat with me because that's part of it. It's not just about top industry people, although I call them fancy people. We have fancy people on all, we do have that. But I really do want to understand what the average person's thinking about. And understanding sort of it's the custom. That's what law is we as a society agree that we're going to stop at a red light. And so I want to understand what that is in the quilting industry.
Yeah, definitely. And I oftentimes find that there's a kind of it's a real fear-based kind of thing, like, oh my gosh, you can't even be inspired by someone else's work without giving them credit, and if you see like their star block and you make a star block, then you can't sell that, even though it's your own design and you drafted the pattern and wrote it yourself. So let's talk about that in particular. All right, so I'm going to give you a scenario and I'd like to hear your opinion about this. So this is a totally made up scenario by me. Okay. So I am hobbyist quilter, and I am inspired by something I see in my son's room. Let's think Legos. Okay, so my son plays Legos, and he asked for a Lego quilt. So I'm like, oh, that's a cool idea. So I start drafting some patterns and writing some stuff out. So Lego is a branded, trademarked thing, obviously, but then my quilt is something that is not a Lego. It is made to look like a Lego. So where does that fall? If I've drawn this out myself, if I plan this out myself, how does this fall in that murky area of copyright?
Okay, it's a little complicated, but we'll stick with this scenario. First, are you using Lego characters or just sort of the sort of blocky thing that Legos does?
Like a block. Like it's gonna look like a 6 block.
Right, well,
made with Lego.
Lego's a kind of funny one because Lego lost the shape of a Lego isn't protected by anything. Their patent's done and they can't trademark it because it's functional. So you can make a Lego block, so that's totally fine. Like, you can use the block, it's not protectable, but let's pretend it is protectable. Let's pretend you're using a character, some Lego character that they made from one of their films, and you're making your kid is Minecraft is a really good example, right? And people way into Minecraft, and they were making all these Minecraft things because they were blocks, right? They were really easy to like replicate. Well, and in those situations, you're creating something that's under copyright, a Lego. So if you're just using the block, no big deal. You can totally do that. But let's say you use the character. So you're making it for your son.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a personal use, right? So sure, it might be infringement of the character.
Yeah.
Sure. But is Lego going to sue you? No.
No.
Right? And those industries have been studying the content industries as well. They're not really concerned about you making a quilt for your kid. That's not going to bug them. In fact, they want you to do that, right? Because then you're sort of, it's good for their brand. Now, let's say his friend's mom wants you to make a quilt for their kid. So you make another one. Sure, that's fine. What if the mom's going to pay you for it?
Yeah.
Still kind of okay. Like, Lego, the brand is not going to be super freaked out.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets kind of interesting. What if you take, you're so popular, now you're making Lego quilts for everybody in the neighborhood, and someone says you should start an Etsy shop.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of a gray area, right? So will you get shut down by Lego? It will depend on the company. The company has the right to tell you not to do it, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard to know. Some company, Etsy thrives. There's a lot of like infringing works on there. But are they going after everybody? No, not really, right? Because it's small. But what if you say, okay, you know what? These are great Lego. These are just amazing. I'm going to get somebody in China to make them. I'm going to set up a factory. It's going to be really efficient. That's when Lego's going to really freak out.
Yeah.
Because now you're in competition with them, and it's commercial use, and you should get a licensing deal, or you're competing with their stuff, and then you're going to definitely hear from their lawyers. So it's a spectrum of infringement where, yeah, you're infringing if you make your kid's thing, but nobody's going to care, to, mass producing in China, people are definitely going to care.
Yeah. Yeah, and I see this a lot. I like comic books, and I go to comic conventions, and I'm so interested that you said cosplay is also a facet of this, because I go to comic book conventions, and like My Little Pony, you have people that will write a whole comic book of My Little Pony that is using those characters, which are copyrighted by Hasbro, but they're still writing a whole comic book. There are people that are making plush dolls to look like My Little Pony characters, and they're not going after them. And so this is the reason why I oftentimes feel like copyright gets way overblown in the quilting world, because if it's something for yourself, if it's something for a small limited, like your grandson, or, maybe a few people, then that's one thing. It starts to get murky when you write a pattern for it, and that pattern is designed to be sold, so then anyone could make it. So let's talk about that. Let's go to Minecraft, because this is something my husband actually has a Minecraft channel and shares Minecraft videos. And so let's say I wanted to design a Minecraft blanket with a creeper image. So that's a character in Minecraft that is a very distinct image. So I want to design this blanket, and I want to make not only a pattern for it so other people can make it too, I want to sell it on my site. So it's going to be a digital download I sell on my site, and then I'm also maybe going to upload that to Spoonflower and print the fabric too. So
right. Okay, so that's a whole bunch of stuff. So interesting, right? So you can sort of see the layers. I suspect your listeners can see the layers too. So with any of these things, My Little Pony, Minecraft, Legos, there's two worlds. There's the licensed world where they're like, if you go to Hot Topic, you can get a My Little Pony shirt or whatever, or a Minecraft shirt or some other shirt. And then there's the unauthorized use people. And I think that Heather Kubiak, she's an attorney who does quilting. She's got this whole thing, which I kind of like, which is just ask. So if I'm Leah Day, and I'm going to so it's really different, right? So if it's me, Elizabeth Townsend Gard, people don't know me very well, right? I'm just a a mom and a law professor and goofball. If I do it, not many people are going to know it. But if you do it, it's a bit different, right? So if I'm Leah Day and I want to put out a Minecraft quilt, I'm going to be talking to Microsoft, who now owns it. Because you can say, I'm going to do it and just ask permission. Now, if you're in between you and me, that's interesting because Microsoft doesn't really want to chat with you probably. These companies have now put out policies that are permissible uses. You can go on their websites and see what you're allowed to do. So there was a big case, a Star Trek case, where they raised a lot of money to make a Kickstarter campaign for a movie. And they raised $1 million, and CBS freaked out about another version of Star Trek. But there was a big lawsuit, and what happened is if you make a movie for under $50,000, you can do it without asking CBS about Star Trek. So there are people are thinking about these paradigms of these commercial uses are just not worth our time. We're allowing certain things to happen. Obviously, we have the right as a copyright holder to say if it's like pornography, we don't want you doing creepy things with a creeper. So there's that aspect of it. The other aspect is sort of knowing the brand. So Minecraft started as this thing that everybody was making their own versions of it, and it's about creativity and building stuff. And so they're used to people doing that. And so it's a brand that expects people to make stuff. And so it's going to be more. Dr. Seuss, for example, has a tendency to sue people that brand. So you got to know kind of how protective they are of the brand. But I think that this is still a new thing for content owners. This idea that someone else could make a comic of My Little Pony is fairly new in terms of being able to do that by technology. So we're still trying to figure it out. But there's reasonableness in all of it.
Certainly.
I would say. It's not black and white. There's no black and white anymore.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I always come back to time and time again is it is always good to ask and not to be afraid to ask. Because there was a blog that I enjoyed reading. This was many years ago. I don't think that it's still online anymore, but it was called The Daily Asker. And she basically just challenged herself to ask a question of somebody, something kind of uncomfortable, maybe like, can I get a discount? Sometimes we just don't ask because it's like, oh, what if they say no? There's that fear, like, what if they yell at me? And ultimately, I think asking, most of the time people are not going to yell at you. In fact, actually, they're going to do the opposite. They're going to say, oh my gosh, you like my stuff. Thank you. Yeah. They're going to thank you for it. They're going to that's going to make them feel good for creating something that had value, that made you like it. And then they're probably, unless they have some reason to say no, they're probably going to say, yes, sure, go at it, have at it. And I mean, anytime that someone asks me if they want to use a quilt pattern, something that I've created, and show it, something along those lines, the answer is always yes. Please go show it. That is taking a quilt pattern that I made once, that I made that quilt once. It's, duplicating it. So that means there's more than one in the world. And then it also means that more people get a chance to see it, which is all good. So the answer should always be yes. And so in the quilting world, have you found that fear is something that holds a lot of people back?
Yeah. Fear, well, it's funny because it's sometimes it holds it back. Sometimes they get weird because I'm there, right? Like they'll be like, I was at a class, like, here, I'll make a copy of that. And they're like, maybe not make a copy of it. So I do turn into the copyright police, which is kind of weird. That's not, I don't know. I think there's fear. I think there's brazenness. I think there's territoriality. I think that's just kind of the nature of all of it. But there's a lot of sharing, and you're an example of that. I want to mention two other concepts that are super important. So copyright holder does hold the rights into the work they create, but there's a lot of stuff in quilting that is a shared community. So all those blocks and ideas of like, I want to make a rainbow Lone Star quilt. That's not protected by anybody. It's really just the expression of a particular quilt. And even in that case, to really assert your copyright, you have to register it. And you have to go to court. You can do a cease and desist letter. So yes, there's people own a copyright, but there's also elements of of a shared community called the public domain. The other part is that there is a part called fair use, and so we're trying to understand that as part of the project. So when is it okay to make a copy of a pattern? When is it okay to comment and criticize work? When is it, how does culture work? And so that's another aspect. A lot of people talk about fair use, and we're going to be looking at fair use in the quilting industry as well. So it's complicated, and it'll take a while to get to sort of weed through it all.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're still very much trying to kind of figure this out and answer this question. And this is something that came up a few months ago, and I'll just kind of briefly outline what happened. Of course, there's a lot of professional quilters that know more of the story than I do, but this is just what I kind of pulled together from online. Basically, there was a secret Facebook group, or it was an open Facebook group, and they were sharing patterns, and it was not just a like, hey, here's this pattern from so-and-so's website that was posted for free, and giving attribution and credit to that person. No, they were taking it and they were actually they were taking the time and energy to remove every amount of attributable information. So they would copy a book, and then they would delete the title page, like the name of the book and the name of the author from the top and bottom of each page. They would take the pattern and they would remove, the title of the pattern and the website that it was found on. So that is a lot of effort, number one. And that's the thing I always come back to is, wow, most people are lazy. If they're going to rip something off, they're going to steal something, they're kind of lazy. They're probably going to leave my name or my website on it. So that'll end up coming back to me anyway. But this group seemed particularly ambitious about ripping things off and removing the attribution. So obviously this was no good, and it made a really big, very, very negative thing happen in the quilting industry. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. And how that all kind of came down.
Yeah, in this day and age, it's super shocking. So you probably remember Napster. Do you remember when people were downloading songs, and then it was, and then they got shut down? It was like RIA went after all kinds of people. So first of all, it's willful infringement, no question. Willful infringement is $150,000 per infringing. That's how much it can be. Is $150,000 per infringement, meaning each pattern that got put up is $150,000 if that pattern is registered with the Copyright Office. Removing it is really not good. The law does not like people doing that. There's a great Jeff Koons, the artist Jeff Koons case, where he takes a postcard of puppies and he rips off the copyright notice on this professional photographer's thing and sends it to Italy and says, copy this for me just like this. And the court goes mad because they're like, you knew it was wrong and you ripped off the copyright notice. So removing attribution is a really bad thing. Obviously, posting other people's work online like that is not good. That's not being a good citizen, and it's certainly not legal. This is not my I'm not, I don't think that's right. It's the law says it's not legal. We've got many cases that say this is not a legal thing.
Yeah.
Because you're taking the economic value from other people, and it's not. That's what copyright's all about. So I've heard this story a number of times now, and it's really interesting because when I tell my copyright friends, they make a face like, oh my, you can't do that. We all know you cannot do that. But clearly this group didn't know that, so.
Yeah, or they did know it, and it was kind of, and this was kind of an interesting take on it. My friend Pepper Corey, she posted a kind of a little note about it and said, in the quilting world, we can kind of get insulated in our groups and kind of feel like we're all chickens here, we're all just this one little group, and we're kind of our own little thing, doing our own little thing, and it's okay so long as it stays within the group. But that was not okay. That was definitely pushing the line, and there was a lot of aggressive back and forth. They ended up going secret and silent and dumped all the content. From what I can understand, I don't know what ended up happening with it, or if there was even any recourse for the people that had stuff stolen. It was just, the whole thing ended up being very negative, and it made me very sad. And it ultimately stopped everyone creating. You know, we all kind of stopped and got mad for a little while. So what?
That's super interesting. Well, if others out there know more about it, I would love to investigate it more, because, you can't do that. Like, I mean, there's a few things in the world you can't do. You can't do that. You really can't do that. Now, you could share old patterns from the 19th century and, get permission, Creative Commons license, put them on it so that you allow it to be shared. And of course, there's Pinterest, which is a whole other kettle of fish, but you can't do that. You can't take other people's patterns, post them online, and take off all of the attribution. That's just bad. It's bad. And then I imagine they induced people. So that's the other component of it. If they said, hey, come do this here, the courts even hate that even more, right?
Yeah, exactly.
A platform encourage people to infringe. That's not good.
Yeah, and I think, ultimately, I think the lesson that comes from this is, the people that were doing this were spending so much time and energy and effort copying books and patterns and stuff, and bothering to do this. My counter to that is to say, gosh, you could have saved so much time just going to those designers and saying, hey, could we post your free pattern and share it to our group? Most likely, if it's a free pattern being put up for free, that person's going to say, sure, post it, leave it the way it is, make sure that it, sends some traffic back to me. My answer, I have lots of free patterns on my website. My answer would always be yes to that, 100% yes. So don't bother taking all that effort and time to sit there and rip something off and remove the attribution. That's such a waste of your time and creative energy. Ask the question that saves everybody time and makes everybody feel good, ultimately. And I think that so much of this is very, very obvious. I wanted to share one.
And it's kind of old school. I mean, it's kind of old school. So I just say that other thing. This idea of like swiping other stuff and doing all that, because what you're saying is that the economy isn't really in. I mean, some patterns, yes, we buy patterns and all that, like in books, definitely. But there is such a free economy of patterns at this moment. And as you said, like, we want to share, we want to give, we want to get our name out, we want to get the brand out. That the idea, their vision of what they were doing is so outdated. It's stupid, but it's also super outdated. They would have been so much better to, as you said, keep the attribution, link back to your website, get that, because then they'll get your fan base, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, it was just an old school dumb move that didn't really understand what the world is at this point.
Yeah. Now, there is a flip side of this, and this is getting into kind of a little bit of my history on, I don't want copyright to become an obsession with quilters, because when I see that happening, like I said, we stop creating, we start getting angry. And I think that's a negative in its own side too. And so I wanted to talk about a post that I wrote. This was many, many years ago, and it was called Copyright Terrorism. And basically, I weigh in on something that had happened where, kind of a fabric designer had, sued a book publisher because her fabrics were used with the fabric manufacturer, with Moda's permission. The fabrics had been used in a book. Then the quilts in the book had then been turned into a tote bag. So the issue here was, I think the tote bag had infringed on the fabric designer's designs, because she had set up some licensing deals to turn those fabric designs into tote bags herself. So it was kind of this whole kind of confusing kerfuffle. But ultimately, my opinion was, this has gone too far. I mean, this is fabric. You slice it up, you make a quilt, you expect it to be able to be used, and getting into fabric designs being home use only. So what's your opinion on that? Do you have any consensus yet on fabrics?
It's really interesting. We're doing a whole study on that right now. We've been looking at sort of what licenses are on the salvage of the fabric. We've been call it Judy Stash, because our neighbor has way too much fabric in, so we just go and photograph her fabric. Like, it's taken us 7 hours so far, and we're not done, to photograph the salvages on her fabric. And I think that what it comes down to, and we're looking into sort of what fabric manufacturers are writing on those, and sort of how legal are they, and how are they not, and first sale doctrine, all kinds of other stuff. So I think two things. First, there are some designers that they reach a level where they are selling their designs for commercial use to Dillard's or Macy's or some other thing, and I totally respect that. And I think that then there's a conflict when the situation you're talking about. And I don't think that happens all the time, but when it does, the copyright holder does hold the rights to make certain things and decide who's making what. That's the nature of the right. So I think that is a really I think that what we're going to find is there are not that many people in that category. And so we have to respect their economics, the economics of what they're doing, their business, their livelihood, how they're putting their kids through college. So I get that part of it. But that doesn't happen all the time. So we have to think, it's like a blockbuster movie. Yeah, they're going to enforce their copyright in a certain way, but are you going to do the same thing for your home movie, right? Yeah. So I think it's just varied. That would be, I guess that would be the main thing I would come across, the main top thing I would say about that one.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And it was one of those situations where I felt myself definitely pivot from using prints, which I never has been a very big deal with my quilting craft, because I like my quilting to show, and prints kind of cover it up. You can't really see through it. So that was a moment where I intentionally pivoted and said, okay, I'm no longer going to really use prints. I'm going to use solids and batiks. But it was a worry, we buy these fabric, and it's like, I should be able to slice it up and make anything I want to with it and compete with it, and then take a photo of it and put it in a book.
Right, and that's what we're looking at, because I'm really, one of the papers, the first paper I'm working on is called The Originality of Polka Dots, because there's a bunch of legal cases about when a polka dot is protectable and when it isn't. Weird, but there is. And it's what you're saying is, how far can you go with what you do when you then are in this situation where you're potentially infringing some other rights. So we buy fabric to make stuff. This is my initial feeling. It's like, we make, like, that's the point. And so at what point am I not allowed to make something? Am I not, is it not allowed to be successful? Is that the thing, right? Like, as long as I'm not successful with whatever I made, everybody's okay. But if it gets successful, is there a problem? So that's one of the papers and one of the studies we're doing, is to try to understand what people are expecting when you buy fabric, and what you can do with it. So.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to have you back maybe in a year or so, and we can talk about this again and see kind of the consensus that comes up, and especially as you start writing these papers and sharing more about quilting and copyright. I find all of this very, very fascinating, and I think ultimately, I think copyright should be the thing that we don't worry about, that isn't on our minds, that isn't constantly, a worry or a stress or causing anxiety. I think it should be, just that thing to know, hey, the people that are professional, that are writing this pattern, they deserve to be paid. And ultimately, so long as you're respecting that and not doing the obvious bad things, like, copying a pattern and taking off all attribution, that is a lot of effort. Then I think that everything's just fine and everybody's doing everything A-okay.
Yeah, and I think that's really the goal of the sort of the public side of the project, which is, let's just have a, under 100-page, really beautiful book that explains this, so that I think that if people, almost like when you go to the DMV and you get your driver's the booklet to explain how the rules of the road, something like that for quilting, because I think that once people understand it, they can choose to break the rules, but they'll know them. And sometimes I think they just don't know. And there's a lot of times you just don't have to worry. Just have fun and be creative and enjoy,
Absolutely. I completely agree. So why don't you share with everybody where they can find you online and check out this new podcast?
Cool. Okay. Well, we are launching, I think, next week. So, but the website is Just Wanna Quilt. So just and then Wanna, WANNA quilt.com. We also have a Facebook page for my quilting army, which is anybody who wants to come play with us and contribute and chat about things. And then people are sending us, we're really excited because we're getting research samples so that we can experience various things. We're doing Block of the Month clubs. And so if you want to be part of that and help me, my quilting army, just go to Facebook. We've got Just Want to Quilt, the Facebook page. So a Facebook group, and we're looking for volunteers to join our army and be part of this, really understand it. And then also, I'm sorry, one more thing. Also, if you'd like to be interviewed, just come to our Facebook page and let me know, because we're looking for regular people, artists, anybody who wants to tell their story and chat with me. I'm super psyched to do that.
Excellent. Excellent. And here's the last question I always ask. What are you most excited about? Whether it's quilting, it's law, it's anything, or all of it all combined in the next 5 years?
Oh, goodness. That surprised me. Yes, right. 5 years. I think sort of just spending more of my life in the quilting world and helping people understand intellectual property and quilting every night. So still being a law professor, but kind of transitioning into spending, because, the quilting people are really fun and rock, and it's just a better way to spend your time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really had fun talking with you about copyright and quilting.
Thank you so much. This is really great. I really appreciate it.
So that's it for this episode. If you'd like to find more episodes of the Hello My Quilting Friends podcast, check it out at leahday.com/podcast. We have a player that will play through all of the episodes shared so far, so you can binge listen for hours on end. Until next time, let's go quilt.